I'm from a creative background, an art background, and moved into a kind of hybrid between art and design. And I'm working on a number of projects at the moment, one of which I'm going to talk about in depth, but I'm going to present some ideas that actually transverse across all of them. Just as a quick name check, I've moved into from a sort of participatory digital cultural practice, so from supporting creative endeavour through technology, tech for good, tech will save us, all this kind of thing, into a kind of almost like a hybrid citizen science type of practice. I'm working actually with the James Hutton Institute, and Kate didn't mention this, on a very large scale project called the GROW Observatory that's doing the job of trying to gather an EU-wide soil moisture map by giving citizens low-cost sensors and enabling them to use the data that's produced in their own practices for growing, and also to help scientists understand and use that data for things like ground truthing Sentinel-1 satellites. I'm not going to talk about that today, but I thought I'd create the connection between the Hutton and a project that I'm working on. I'm going to start first of all by talking about design. We've talked about art and design a little bit, but design in its shifting context, the definition and application of design now is changing. It's not about the practice of giving form to objects and to graphics. Design now situates itself also in describing the processes for problem solving and new approaches to understanding complexity. It's a human-centered process where, if you want to say the user, if we want to use that word, is placed in the center, and design is about making the connection between people and the designed world. So designers often call, or often have in their mantra, this practical means of leaving the world in a better place, better than we found it, and we often ask ourselves, not how can we do that, but how can we actually be that? So, the Anthropocene, and this is an artist's project actually. I thought we've talked about the Anthropocene, but I wanted to bring it back to me actually. If accepted in 1950, all of my life I'll have lived in the Anthropocene, and so will my parents have lived the majority of their lives. That means I've developed entrenched personal habits and behaviours and attitudes that are probably quite difficult to overcome because I'm in the system as well. And I want to talk a little bit about how we're trying to use design practice to move forward with that. I'm going to talk about the environment of framing the challenge that we're working with. There's been a study of 25 EU cities in terms of their environmental air pollution. PM, particulate matter, at a scale of 2.5, the level of 2.5, actually gets into our lungs and causes huge health problems. If inhaled, they cause serious health effects that can be long-lasting and cause early death. 30% of the EU population live with noise that's exceeding the healthy limit. Blood pressure rising, decreased capacity to learn, creativity, stress through lack of sleep, depression, etc., etc. Citizens around the world and cities are becoming increasingly aware of the environments that they're living in, but they often feel helpless to do anything about it. So I'm working on citizen monitoring experiments, participatory sensing, not citizen science, but participatory sensing, bringing participatory digital culture together with design and creativity to open up data, to assist and support people in driving change. So lots of new opportunities where technology is concerned. There are low-cost sensors emerging onto the market. Air quality egg is one of them. There are methods for beginning to go out and find out about your local environment. But really, it's not about tech for good. It's the kind of social needs, the events, and the capabilities of people to make sense and use that data in their lives. So of course, citizens monitoring the environment isn't a new thing. We have probably heard about the Christmas bird count. It's been running for 115 years. Over 70,000 volunteers observe every Christmas the bird species. But they don't take advantage of that data. This is an example of a contributory citizen science project. They gather the data, they give it to the scientists get some knowledge, they maybe do something about it, but the citizens are very passive in that process. The kinds of citizen science that we're moving and beyond actually are in co-created citizen science. There are 3 approaches. This is about the new stuff, actually. Co-created, bringing the co-design and the co-production of projects together. And we're working with fab labs and maker spaces, so where people come together to make things together. Making means owning. Making things together in cities to allow new urban sensing to be designed and released without being a part of a specific citizen science project or a large company's technology agenda. So co-creation presents, I think, this critical move from citizens being passive and contributing to citizens taking part in the scoping of issues, in the design of projects, in the question formation, in the building of setting up of tech and the planning of approach, in the goals and the futures and what they want to happen, in the gathering of data and the understanding of data, making themselves aware of what data can do, as well as making change. So why is this important? Well, we think co-creation allows people to move beyond the conventional. When you're co-creating in a group of people with scientists with different sorts of expertise, technologists, bringing communities of practice and communities of interest together, you can move beyond what is the conventional now. Sorry. And so we're moving from a technology, making sensors, which is where this started, to actually to sense making. We're turning data into something that people care about, creating stories with it. Shifting the focus from tech to meaning, from action to change, and then iterating. So this is all about open science, the big kind of open science agenda, opening hardware, opening data, opening design, in order to enable the monitoring of environmental issues such as soil, air, water, noise, light pollution. One of the pieces of technologies that we're working with has come from this absolute grassroots, come from creative culture. It's called the Smart Citizen. It was developed in Barcelona at IAC in the Fab Lab there. Very tech orientated, complex to start. It failed actually in its first iteration when it was released actually to the techies, the geeks themselves. They didn't know how to use it, even though it was open, it was complex. And so they've been improving this all the time. So we've employed it in a project called, I'm going to reveal now, do the big reveal now, Making Sense. This is my t-shirt. I've moved from researcher to activist. We're not only creating knowledge, we're creating action out there in the street. So we're using that data, contextualizing the data, creating artistic interventions in the city, and campaigning to gain attention. These are just some of the communities we've worked with across 3 cities, the city of Barcelona, Amsterdam, and Pristina in Kosovo, which have got some real issues. Pristina, terrible air pollution, terrible air quality, populations of young people, 60% unemployment, really critical problems there. Working with young people to help them understand what air quality means and how to go about changing that. And we've had some success in change in policy there. In Amsterdam, they're also looking at air quality, but air quality in the big city where people living next to six-lane roads in the centre of the city, where traffic lights mean that cars are stationary outside somebody's bedroom window and they're suffering health complaints. Communities there have been campaigning for a number of time, but without success, actually. They're just campaigning. The government's not listening to them, even in the super democratic, wonderful place that Amsterdam is. and so we're working with them. In Barcelona, one community is living in the Plaza del Sol, which is a beautiful square, the Square of the Sun. Unfortunately, that means that lots of people want to go there at night and drink and have a great time, which is wonderful, but it means that the noise levels of 80 to 85 decibels up until about 3 o'clock in the morning, the residents in that square are getting absolutely no sleep at all, and it's causing huge problems for them. So, what are we doing about it? Well, we've devised a strategy to work with citizens that goes through a number of stages, and I just wanted to show you that now. All of this is a kind of co-created process where we're bringing, first of all, working with actually critical issues that exist in places where we can bring citizens, sometimes scientists, sometimes we leave the real experts out of the equation until we've worked with the citizens to map the local issues, to identify and onboard the right people. Sometimes it's good actually to leave the municipality out of the room until the community and the trust has been built. We've then gone about planning and preparing and positioning campaigns and goals, and we often use a lot of design practice in order to do that. So having face-to-face workshops where we're actually mapping a day in the life of somebody very visually, looking at the pain points, looking at when they're woken up in the night and what sound wakes them up. Thinking about when that traffic is stationary for long amounts of time outside their window, and producing maps of what happens in their daily life, bringing it back to the person, and then planning what kind of future would they like to see. What happens or what might happen if that looked better, and what might be the possible causes. So the citizens themselves come up with questions and hypotheses about what might happen. And then we go about training people to use low-cost sensors, positioning them correctly to try and answer some of their questions, and gathering and sharing data. But data from sensors actually isn't enough, because the data means nothing. You need to contextualize it. So we're doing things like gathering community-level indicators where people can record what kinds of and contextualize the sounds that they're hearing, the smog that they're seeing, the health effects, the increase in purchase of various drugs, etc., in their area, begin to contextualize what that means to provide further evidence. We're then discovering and sharing the data, so we're opening up that data so the citizens themselves get a hold of that data and become data aware. They understand what that data means. They understand also how the municipalities work, what kind of evidence they need. And then we create stories and interventions, and the interventions have been extremely successful, from creating a huge light sound monitor in the Plaza del Sol that goes to red when the noise reaches above a certain level, and so it's very beautiful to look at, but actually it's telling people about the noise that they're generating to the square, to silent discos, to planting, to all kinds of things that are happening in that environment, and it's extremely exciting. I'd encourage you to go onto YouTube and look for Making Sense EU, and you'll find a huge amount of videos and all sorts of things that you can kind of look at those sorts of interventions. So we're evaluating and we're making sense and we're trying to make change, and we're also distributing all of the assets, all the toolkits, all of those frameworks and all of those descriptions of the workshops that we've gone through to get people there, because it's a long process. So this is the sensing process. If we go back, you can see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. And the central part of that is a very visible public-facing process. It's surrounded by these key principles of openness, co-creation, empowerment, and change-making. And so if we look down the funnel, it looks like this. That's how we're developing a kind of visual way of describing what we're doing. If I think about emergent themes and what we're seeing, these are the themes actually that we've started to look at, the insights that we're gathering from these sensor pilots. Where active citizens and users are becoming designers and producers, working in partnership with stakeholders. We're building capacity, understanding that sustainable transformation requires trust. It's built through communication, through culture, through artistic intervention, through participation. We're building infrastructure, we're infrastructuring people, enabling platforms, using enabling open platforms, not closed and owned by large tech companies. So it's kind of a purposeful devising of structures and platforms to support participation, keep it open, and focus on trust. Long-term action to maintain and develop things as well. We're working very much at a community scale, but replicating. So we're going deep at a community scale with the issues, but we're harnessing collective power of the community. Fab Labs and makerspaces exist in cities across the world, actually now. And so we're able to leapfrog that network in order to give the tools, etc., to other communities and have them test and replicate, even in different cultures with different issues. We're evaluating success and impact as we're going along. So we're bringing scientists in to help us to understand the data. In Amsterdam, really quite interesting, they thought, and they were right, that the road into Amsterdam was the real problem. There's a big tunnel that goes under the city, brings cars into the centre of Amsterdam, and during the sensing period of 6 weeks, that was shut for 4 weeks, which was a golden opportunity for us to see, whilst the road was coming into the city, whilst it was shut, and when it opened again. And we got the data during that period. So we almost had a kind of baseline. Indeed, when the cars went there, the pollution went down. But it went down not only next to the place where the citizens were, but in another hotspot in the city that we would never have imagined was affected, actually. And that was all to do with wind speed, the design of the city, humidity, etc., etc. What the citizens didn't realise is those beautiful trees in their street that they loved, that they thought actually were helping with the air quality, with the air pollution, when they came into leaf, formed a continuous canopy down the street and actually kept the pollution in around their environment. So the citizens began to appreciate the complexity and the system that they were living within, and the importance of collaborating with the municipality, with the scientists, to understand that complexity and form a strategy for change. So we're redistributing power. People have become empowered, I can say that for sure. And I think we're enhancing imagination and hope. Because in the interventions and the strategies that we've actually employed through the design interventions and the artworks, they've been in the news. There's been policy change in Kosovo for the first time. They've got an environmental air quality policy at government level for the first time ever. So I just wanted to say thank you, to welcome you to have a look at the Making Sense EU website, and also there's lots and lots and lots of material on YouTube, links to all of our documentation of the project. It's all open, the tech's open, so please go and have a look and see what you can do with it. Thank you very much.